Hello, Joe Trottola here, Monday, May the 10th. Today we're going to talk about doctor networks and MAPD plans. What do you do when the doctor is not in the network? Okay, couple of disclaimers. They're on every single one of our training videos. Pause it if you want to read it. Let's begin by doing a very quick overview. Most of you who are watching this should know all of this already, but it's a very quick overview. We're going to just kind of focus on the HMO and the PPO today. Really quick, HMO versus PPO. As you know, HMOs usually require a PCP to coordinate the care. They require referrals to see specialists and other services such as MRI, blood work, etc. They can only use network doctors unless it's an HMO POS, where some services may be provided out of network. Now, what exactly are some services? It varies from plan to plan, but usually it'll be a specialist that they don't have a lot of contracted specialists within the area, or other types of services they may not have in the area. We find this often in more rural-based areas as opposed to more urban-based areas. And then PPOs generally do not require a PCP to coordinate care. I shouldn't say generally, they do not require a PCP to coordinate care. No referrals to see the specialists and other services, and that they can see out-of-network doctors, usually at a higher cost. However, this is very important because this is going to come up in a little bit in this training. There is no guarantee they will build a plan on behalf of the member, and I'll get into that in just a bit. Now, first thing you want to do is, I'm a big component of prepping for the presentation, prepping for the client. So as you're gathering information of the client, when you get to the part of where you're going to get the list of the doctors, you always want to take their temperature. It's what we call it. It's called taking their temperature. And the thing you got to keep in the back of your mind is that sometimes when the prospect gives you a list of doctors to look up, they sometimes often provide you a list of every doctor they can think of. Some of them are one-offs, doctors that they saw once 4 years ago because something showed up on a test. And a lot of times they'll give you a list of doctors of whom they may not have been under care for a number of years. It's very, very important that, as they give you the list of doctors, you want to ask two vital questions. The first one is an elimination-based question, and the second one is a secured or kind of which of these doctors you think that the client will tell you that they'll never give up. So first question will be, start by asking if you found the exact plan that they were looking for. It had all the benefits that they needed and wanted, and it had, the lower copays and the service costs, obviously, if they already have a Medicare Advantage plan. But one or more, okay, use your personality, but one or more of your doctors were not in the network. Who would they put on the chopping block? Now, make it fun and non-threatening. The way that I usually say it is I would say, I have your list of doctors. I'm not insinuating anything yet. I have not had the opportunity to look at plans. I don't know. However, when I start to look at plans and I find the one that will meet all of your needs, lower copays, more benefits, lower service costs, but that had all your doctors but one, who would be the one that we could put on the chopping block? And then I would just go silent, and they'll usually tell you one. Believe it or not, you'll usually get one. Then that's not enough for me. I got to ask one more time. Then I'll say, okay, we got one. Would there be a second? Okay. If they tell me a second, I'm going to ask for a third. If they tell you no, just that one, the other two are important to me, then you at least know that you got who your let go doctors are, and then you have an idea of who your must-haves. Must-haves we're going to cover in just a second. You may get a situation where they'll tell you, under no circumstance am I willing to part with any of those doctors. I can tell you, folks, it's very rare. It's going to happen, but it's very rare. Now, another thing to kind of keep in the back of your mind while you want to make this part fun and very loose is that sometimes the thought of changing a doctor is so much work, it's just easier to stay in a status quo state, okay? keep it in the back of your mind. You don't want to overbear the person at this stage of the conversation. You don't want them to think that they have to change their doctors because you don't know yet. All you're trying to do is you're trying to see where they're at, and you're trying to understand what their relationship is with their doctors, because at the end of the day, ultimately, it's going to be less work for you that you have to do. The next thing you want to do is you want to identify which doctors are key and must have no matter what. You'll find this a lot with patients and specialists. A lot of times, especially in the cardiology space, even oncology too, you'll find that that particular doctor, kind of brought them through a major health event, and it got them through the other side, and they're healed, or they're in the healing process. So there's a very special bond that that patient has with that doctor, and they would be unwilling to part with the doctor. But you don't know who is who. You never want to assume. That's the whole thing. And don't assume because you came from one appointment at 10 and the person wanted to keep all their doctors that the appointment at noon was exactly the same, because no two people are alike. So the next thing you want to ask is you want to ask which of these doctors, and this is the way we ask it, but which of these doctors do you love with all your heart, and that no matter what, you will never ever change them, even if it meant you spent more money to see him or her. So when you kind of ask it this way, they're going to give you, kind of a verbal response to that. And their verbal response will tell you more or less exactly how loyal and strong someone is with their doctor relationships. This stage it's super important because number one is what you're really doing is you're understanding your prospect even deeper, but you'll learn exactly who a must-have doctor is. Just because somebody says to you on the front end, I want to keep all my doctors, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a deal breaker if their 7 doctors don't fit into a single plan, because it's very difficult to find that. Okay, so yeah, I take what they say in the beginning very serious, that they want to keep all their doctors, but then I want to ask some more questions to understand what does all their doctors mean to them. And you'll come to find out, and I say this sincerely, that on the example that I'm giving, the list of 7 doctors, one of them was an orthopedic surgeon who repaired their hip 7 years ago. So not finding an orthopedic surgeon that you saw 7 years ago on a plan for most people is not going to be a deal breaker, but you got to have that dialogue with them. And there's a certain crafty, very non-threatening way to do it. And this is just one example. Okay, now what? So you asked the 2 questions. Question 1 is who can we get rid of if we had to? Number 2, who is a must-have no matter what? You have your list. Hopefully you took your list from 5 to 3. That's usually what the norm is. If you have a list of 5 doctors, you whittle it down to 3. And of the 3, you usually get 1, but almost always 2 must-haves, so that you have a third, what we call a designated doctor. So first thing you want to do is when you trim it down, for the most part, is you want to build a plan around the doctor that matters the most to them. So that's where you would start. You would start by looking up the doctor that they hold dear to. And then you kind of work your way down the list. In a perfect world, you want to find all the doctors on the plan. It just makes a better, scenario. It's a better situation, but we all know that that's always going to be true. In the event that the client is only willing to hold on to a specialist, but could care less about the PCP, and they task you to help them find a PCP, what we find is the better approach to do that is to call the specialist that they hold dear, talk to that specialist office and ask the specialist who are a few of their referring PCPs. Take down that information, and then you and the client can look together on Health Grades or any other review-based website and see what other patients are saying about those PCPs. And then, of course, remind the client that if they select a new PCP for a plan, that they're not married to it. They have the right to change the PCP. Usually, for most plans, it's once a month. If you absolutely cannot find any plan that covers their must-have doctors, and they're already in a Medicare Advantage plan, then at this point in time, you have to show them the value of the change. Okay. Now, I will tell you from experience, a more than we would like percentage of people will just stay with what they have. Okay. Because remember what I said before, the pain of having to go through the process of going to see a new doctor often outweighs the pleasure of receiving extra OTC or $5 less on the copay, or unlimited rides to and from the doctor. So people make decisions, believe it or not, versus pain versus pleasure, and it's really what is the feeling that they want to go through more. The pain of changing a doctor will often trump the pleasure of getting the extra benefits, especially if the person's been in the plan for a number of years. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. I'll tell you, and I'm going to say this publicly, I find it hard to believe that there's agents out there that boast that they sell 30 or 40 Medicare Advantage plans a week in the field, because honestly, I'm calling BS on a lot of that, because simply the fact that we come across so many people that they're perfect fits for the new plan, but for one reason or another, they're just unwilling to part with their doctors, and their doctors don't fit into the new plan. The next thing you want to do is, if they're new to Medicare and you're not finding that their doctors are in the plan, at the end of the day, this is just another reason why a Medigap policy may be a better solution for them if they're unwilling to change doctors, no matter what. So again, just kind of things to keep in mind. Start with the doctor that matters the most, build the plan that way. Work down the list to the let goes. If the let goes don't show up in the plan, it's not an end of the world, because you had asked them already ahead of time. You go and take the list of doctors, then you go and look up the plan, then you come back over and tell them that, hey, out of your 5 doctors, I found 3 on the plan. The buying mentality may just shut that whole thing down and say, well, forget about it. If you can't find my doctors, I'm just going to stick with what I have. You got to address this earlier on. It's something that you have to get in front of. That's the key here. The whole key here is getting in front of it. Now, a couple of do's and don'ts. Number one, never put a prospect into a PPO plan if their primary is not a network. Why? Because they generally see a PCP usually more than the others. And then the last thing you want is their longstanding PCP office to turn them away because they don't take that insurance. And here's what I mean. Just because the PPO plan will pay for out-of-network benefits, right? It's in the summary of benefits. They will pay for out-of-network benefits. It doesn't ensure and guarantee that the physician or the facility will treat and bill. Treat and bill means the patient comes in, they'll file the claim to the insurance company, they'll wait for reimbursement, they'll collect a copay. We're finding that's happening a lot on the PPO side, where the client's going into the office with their, I was going to see if I had a card, but they're going to the office with their healthcare card. The PCP office is looking at the healthcare card and saying, sorry, we don't take that. You can be a cash payer and then you can send the bill, to your insurance company, but I'm sorry, we don't do that. Now, going to a one-off specialist, once every 2 years for a check-in is not a difficult thing for a consumer, a member, a consumer, a client to pay for the service and then submit the claim. But a PCP, it's a much bigger of a problem. So I certainly would not do that. The only exception to the rule would be that you receive a written confirmation from the primary care physician's office, PCP, I have a typo there, that they will treat and bill on behalf of the member. So very important. Don't just call up the office and the guy or girl says they'll do it. Get that thing in writing, because it's a complaint. It's a complaint waiting to happen. Number 2, never tell a client a doctor is in the network unless you're 100% certain. Do not rely on calling the doctor and asking, hey, do you take XYZ insurance? Because they may take the commercial, but not the HMO or PPO of XYZ. And then secondly, when you call up a PCP's office and you say, hey, do you take XYZ Medicare Solutions R3619-14, they're not trained on the front end of those calls to readily have that information. Now you may get shuffled through the practice where you end up on billing, and there's no guarantee that billing would even know that as well, because they're probably contracted with a ton of health carriers. So if you don't find the doctor on the website or in the doctor directory, do not rely on the fact that the office just said, yeah, we take it. You're going to have to do a little bit more digging on that one. Always confirm with the out-of-network doctor that they will treat and bill the member. Otherwise, you will need to disclose to the member that they may have to pay for the doctor's bill first, then submit for the claim. Just what I said before. Again, PPO plan will pay out of network, but there's no promise that they will build a plan on behalf of the member. And then finally, always take a screenshot when you locate a doctor in a plan's network, okay? It's what we do. We send it to the client via an email, and then we also store it in the file. Very, very important. This will help you if a complaint ever arises due to network issues. I tell you guys, it happens all the time. If you take a look at all the complaints that come in, usually medication costs and network issues are the majority of the complaints that come in. And if you don't have that piece of paper that says you looked the doctor up and the doctor was in the network, now it becomes a he said, she said situation. And again, good practice would be to always send it to the client. What's coming up this week, just like it is, if you take a look, comment below with your questions, and I will address every single one of them in our next segment. Please hit the like button below on our YouTube channel. If you have not subscribed yet, we had almost 80 people subscribe in the last 48 hours. Thank you, Joanna. We want to tune in Mondays and Thursdays for our weekly training. And as my little secret came out, we used this template on all the trainings, and I didn't fix this paragraph. And it says, we will go over all your questions and answers and best practices. So on this Thursday, write into me any questions you have about doctor networks, looking up doctors, how to look up doctors, things that you're struggling with. Send me questions, send me comments. I will address all of them on Thursday's training. I wish everybody the best and have a happy Monday.